Pues buenas tardes a todos, soy Traxium, sed bienvenidos a un nuevo vídeo. Y bueno, hoy vamos a ver el documental que sacaron los de Kaiserreich explicando un poquito la historia de su universo. Está subtitulado al español, así que creo que me parece un momento, o sea, me parece algo bastante guay de hacer. En plan, verlo juntos y a ver qué os parece. Porque la verdad que el trabajo que están poniendo el equipo de Kaiserreich Cinema a la hora de hacer pues pósters, música, que están haciendo música a montones, estos vídeos de lore, están haciendo también un corto, de hecho lo ponía esta mañana por Twitter, lo he comentado. Fijaros, están haciendo un corto con actores reales y tal, o sea, me parece brutal la cantidad de cosas que están haciendo y me parece súper guay, así que para darlo un poco a conocer también a vosotros, por si no conocéis mucho Kaiserreich, pues es un mod del Hearts of Iron 4, también estaba presente en el JOI 3 y en el JOI 2, si no me equivoco, que plantea la idea de qué hubiera pasado en la historia, qué hubiera pasado en esos años que comprime la franquicia Hearts of Iron si Alemania hubiera ganado la Primera Guerra Mundial. Entonces, para entender un poco el qué pasa en esta línea temporal ficticia, por supuesto, que se inventan en esta franquicia que es Kaiserreich, pues vamos a ver estos documentales. Creo que solo hay una parte, así que bueno, vamos a disfrutarla. Voy a ver si se ve esto completo. Vamos a ponerlo así.
As German troops marched through Paris, the guns on the Western Front had finally fallen silent. The horrors of the Great War, which claimed over 30 million lives and wrought havoc upon all of Europe, had ended. The German Empire had triumphed utterly.
O sea, ya nos ponen desde el punto en el que ha triunfado Alemania en la Primera Guerra Mundial.
The age of the Kaiserreich.
Ah, vale. Pero nos van a explicar cómo llegan a ese punto. Mirad, titulares: Francia colapsa, revolución en Gran Bretaña, los sindicalistas, ¿no? Qué guapo, tío. Los imperios centrales victoriosos. Uf, está muy currado, tío. Está muy currado. Tengo varios pósters de Kaiserreich, obviamente no en esta habitación. La revolución... En fin, ¿qué hubiera pasado si Alemania ganase la Primera Guerra Mundial? El mundo de Kaiserreich. Vale, ya estamos en mitad de la Primera Guerra Mundial. Una decisión que cambió el curso de la guerra. O sea, gracias a esto ganarían la Primera Guerra Mundial. No creo que tuviese que ver con ovnis o tecnología legendaria. Estamos pensando en otras marcas, ¿no?
The opponents of unrestricted submarine warfare brace themselves for defeat when Erich Ludendorff argues in the strongest possible terms that unrestricted submarine warfare should be resumed. The previous year, this Prussian son of minor nobility had been raised to the rank of General Quartiermeister.
O sea, el tema de la reanudación de la guerra submarina sin restricciones, que supongo que históricamente no se hizo, y aparentemente al cambiar esto cambia ya la guerra, acaba ganando Alemania. Pero claro, eso haría que interviniese Estados Unidos, ¿no? O de hecho incluso intervino Estados Unidos gracias a eso. O con ese casus belli.
Had he been given the apparent authority to override the German Navy's own wishes, there would have been little standing in the way of his and Hindenburg's total...
Algo que hace mucho Kaiserreich es centrarse en figuras históricas, ¿vale? Esto es importante tenerlo en cuenta porque no es tanto de... es que los alemanes de repente hacen la épica y ganan. No, o sea, hay un trasfondo.
The Kaiser has decided against resuming unrestricted submarine warfare. The decision will only delay, not prevent, the rise of Ludendorff and Hindenburg to supreme authority within the...
O sea, reanudan la guerra submarina y Estados Unidos no interviene.
It near eliminates the risk of the United States declaring war on Germany herself. The United States must be neutral in fact as well as in name during these days that are to try men's souls. We must be impartial in thought as well as in action, must put a curb upon our sentiments as well as upon every transaction that might be construed as a preference of one party to the struggle before another. Woodrow Wilson, 28th President of the United States.
Esto lo dijo Woodrow Wilson, de
Wilson
verdad.
spoke for many Americans who wanted the United States to stay out of any conflict. But there was a darker and deeper reason behind US.
Vale, esto es lo que hay que enterarse, o sea, ¿por qué Estados Unidos no interviene?
1914, agents of the Abteilung 3B, the Germans' elusive spy agency, had been infiltrating the highest rungs of US.
Ostras, por los espías alemanes.
Moving through the swathes of German expats and immigrants on the northeast, their single aim was to keep the US from intervening in any European war.
What?
This would buy the Kaiserreich the time to make a decisive strike against the Allies and claim.
What? O sea, los espías alemanes en Washington evitan que intervenga Estados Unidos, o al menos les gana tiempo.
Submarine warfare and claimed countless American lives. The Abwehr's efforts might have been in vain, but with no pressing need to side against Germany, proponents of American neutrality maintained control of Congress. President Wilson, re-elected in 1916 with a slogan of "He kept us out of war," was all too willing to steer clear of foreign entanglements.
Bueno, pausa publicitaria ahora, pero entonces plantean aquí como a Wilson como que no está a favor de la guerra. Creo que esto es más o menos histórico, o sea que creo que puede encajar dentro de su personaje, pero el tema es que eventualmente sí que intervino, ¿no? Creo porque hundieron un buque comercial o algo así, creo que fue como la excusa.
This disaster discourages the French High Command from continuing great offensives until the end of the year, giving Germany a chance to recover from the unmitigated catastrophe of the Brusilov offensive.
Vale, y en Francia mientras tanto hay disturbios, ¿no?
With both sides suffering more than 1 million casualties, the aftermath of this stunning and forward-looking offensive masterminded by General Brusilov was a pause in the Russian advance. The motherland simply had no further reinforcements to send, and further attacks were out of the question. The Central Powers, meanwhile, had taken careful note of the devastating use of carefully targeted artillery and small unit tactics with which Brusilov had found success. It was an approach which would now be turned against a Russian army which had exhausted itself.
A los rusos parece que no les iba del todo mal, ¿no?
And Austro-Hungarian forces had not been preparing an assault. The Russian Empire's time was running out. A peasantry and working class furious about looming famine, military incompetence, and a lack of compassion turned their ire on Tsar Nicholas II.
Vale, las clases pobres empiezan a protestar, hacen motines.
The Tsar abdicates
En Alemania y abdica el zar.
A provisional government is formed under the brilliant lawyer Alexander Kerensky.
Gobierno de
The young
Kerensky.
man's unstable reign is quickly snatched away by a new emerging faction, the feared Russian Bolsheviks, led by the enigmatic Vladimir Lenin. As the old guard
Bueno, esto
of
es
Russian
más o
Empire
menos
and
se parece a
Kerensky's
la...
democratic forces form an unlikely alliance against the Red Menace.
Ojo.
It is not long before the broiling conflict erupts in open war.
O sea que aquí sí que hay guerra civil rusa.
Russian civil war
Ah,
has begun.
los rojos y los blancos, ¿no?
In Berlin, the news
Pero esto
of
es más o
Lenin's
menos histórico
The
también, ¿no?
Kaiser's decision to secretly assist Lenin's return to Russia has paid off, and the bear to the east is mortally wounded. Offensives drive deep into Russia, and in March 1918, Germany signs the Treaty of
Brest-Litovsk, pues sí, esto es lo histórico, ¿no?
secretly established Russian-Soviet Federative Socialist Republic. Swathes of lands that once belonged to the Tsar now answer to the Kaiser and to the Austrian Emperor. In Vienna, 1918 brings more for Emperor Karl to celebrate. The stalemate of inconclusive and bloody battles along the Isonzo River comes to an end with the Caporetto offensive, beating the humiliated Italian army back to the Piave River. Only a heroic last-minute defense prevents the Austrians from taking Venice, and when the front line has settled, the Habsburg Emperor's army...
Joder, la guerra entre Italia y Austria es digna de libro, ¿eh? Lo que hicieron ahí los italianos, tío, en las montañas. Eso sí que es heroico, macho.
The Ottoman Empire, long derided
Ojo, los
as the
otomanos.
man of Europe, proves incurable.
Ah,
After a series of devastating raids and attacks by the dashing Lawrence of Arabia
Lawrence de
in
Arabia.
1917, the Sultan slowly loses control of his precious railways, lifelines to Ottoman frontline soldiers. Chronically undersupplied and outmatched by Allied and rebel Arab infantry, the Ottoman army loses Baghdad and Jerusalem to British forces. Celebrations in London are short-lived.
a ver, de momento tampoco veo muchísima
In
diferencia.
December 1917, another blow to
A grandes
Iran
rasgos, ¿sabes?
was a death knell for their relationship with the United States. On a routine patrol, a British
No, internet. No. Es que el internet de esta casa, tío, es horrible. A ver si consigo que vaya el wifi. Fuck. Pues corto de momento. Ojo.
28th President of the United States, killing several US citizens.
Oh, vale.
To Allied morale rings a death knell for their relationship with the United States. On a routine patrol, a British submarine mistakenly torpedoes an American freighter.
Ah, los británicos revientan un carguero
killing several US
de
citizens.
los americanos.
Seizing their opportunity, pro-German politicians in the United States move swiftly. Urging support for the Central Powers, the backlash they whip up forces Britain into a partial opening of the blockade, averting the looming spectre of famine in Central Europe. The opening of the blockade, combined with the relief of winning the war in the East, rallied German forces and set off a series of cascading events that would eventually spell doom for the beleaguered Allies on the Western Front.
Ok, pues esto ya sí que es un cambio
Germany
grande.
focused on the East. In the first half of 1918, the British and French realized that with American support no longer a reasonable expectation, the time to strike is now.
Vale, van a
At
hacer una
this stage in the
ofensiva.
war, the sides
Empieza
still seemed
1917.
relatively even-matched,
La película,
an
digo.
assumption shattered by the outcome of the Allied Great Spring Offensive. After 3 months of fighting, not one of its objectives had been met, and an irrecoverable 800,000
800,000 bajas,
suffered
chaval.
by the Allies. The capitulation of Greece to Field Marshal Erich von Falkenhayn a month later buoyed German spirits further. With Russia eliminated and the Allies exhausted in the West, Germany has decisively claimed the initiative in the war. It is up to her to determine how to use it. She would do so in 1919.
1919.
After spending the second half of 1918 biding time and redeploying forces from the Eastern Front, the German High Command begins its own great offensive, masterminded by Ludendorff.
Ludendorff.
So-called infiltration tactics proved devastatingly effective, and the crucial railway hub of Amiens, the Allied headquarters, falls to Germany on the 26th.
Ostras, toman a Mies, chaval.
The British and French forces are now unable to
A ver, aunque haya cosas más o menos locas, tío, dentro de lo que cabe es plausible, como lo plantean todos, ¿sabes?
The first short-distance artillery shots hit the capital.
No es un... No, es que esta batalla en vez de perderla la ganan. Y con eso ya cambia todo, ¿sabes?
As supreme French commander and replaced with Philippe Pétain. A final blow is not yet delivered.
Ah, está muy
The
guapo, ¿eh?
long-awaited Austrian offensive to knock Italy out of the war has stalled, and German forces are diverted to the southern front. While they will find success, Pétain and the defenders of France are granted a short operational respite. The British army uses this time to attempt a fighting retreat to the Channel coast, hoping to withdraw safely to the United Kingdom. The Entente Cordiale is crumbling. As the hungry citizens of Paris begin to man the barricades once more, the desperate French leadership gambles everything on a counter-breakthrough in the Oise region. Miraculously, French tanks and cavalry divisions punch through the German lines, offering tantalizing hope. The lasting impact, however, is simply to delude the French High Command that a further offensive would have the same success. As she throws all remaining resources into an attempt to link up with the isolated British forces near the coast, France's luck finally runs out. The rear of the front collapses in the face of a German counterattack. It felt like their great offensive had come again, and soon we had no more shells to fire back. Unnamed French soldiers.
Las banderas, tío, súper importantes también en la Primera Guerra Mundial.
There are no more supplies coming. Unrest and rebellion in French cities has slowed war production to a crawl. Pétain advises against surrender, but the matter is taken out of his hands by the French army's old enemy, mutiny.
El motín.
With her army crippled, and with no other options, France requests an armistice with the German Empire. On the 4th of October, it is signed, both sides hurrying through negotiations. One condition is that on the 6th of October, the German army's victory will become unambiguous with a march through Paris itself.
Ostras, qué duro, ¿eh? Los alemanes marchando por París.
Watches from the Eiffel Tower as he and his men raise the flag of the empire that now unquestionably dominates mainland Europe.
Pero Francia termina siendo independiente.
A month later, punishing and humiliating the fragile provisional French government. Its people are still up in arms. The Third Republic was born with revolutionaries in Paris and German armies victorious on its soil.
Y así nace la Tercera República Francesa.
From Dunkirk to the Dnieper River, the guns have fallen silent.
Ah, pues aquí da a entender que los alemanes toman Francia. Pero cuando empiezas a jugar en Kaiserreich, tanto Francia como Inglaterra son países sindicalistas.
The stage is set for the Second Battle of Jutland, and the war seems far from over.
A ver, más cosas que sé. Vale, continuará. Creo que no hay más partes de momento. Pero más cosas que sé es que, por ejemplo, el gobierno británico y la corona británica se exilia a Canadá, porque allí también triunfa la rebelión sindicalista. Así que supongo que eso lo veremos en el siguiente capítulo, que no sé cuándo saldrá, porque esto creo que ya tiene un tiempo, es del 18 de julio. Y aún no ha subido más partes, así que esperemos que lleguen pronto, ¿vale? Bueno, aunque aquí tenemos algo de la guerra civil, podríamos ir viendo esos vídeos también. En fin, chicos, a ver qué os parece. Está muy, muy chulo, muy, muy currado. Espero que os haya molado. Y nada más, nos vemos en el siguiente. Chao, chao.